So the first question which was submitted was, why did you choose the law firm now that you work for? So was there anything that sort of stood out to you which you were interested in?
Yeah, like I think I wanted something that was, so I basically studied in like quite a small group environment. Like I'd always been like when I studied law, I was in like very small groups the whole time. Like I sort of felt like I learned better in just having a couple of people like in that learning environment with me. And so I looked for a firm that had really small intakes because I kind of thought like maybe that's how I work best. So it was traditionally the US law firms that had, at the time, that had the smaller intakes. It isn't necessarily true now, actually, because some US law firms have big intakes, just like a Magic Circle firm would. But yeah, that was what I was looking for at the time. And the other thing was like, I wanted something that was like a really challenging working environment. And the US law firms tend to be quite responsibility heavy, like right from the beginning. So you'll get a lot of exposure, you get a lot of like client work, client contact, and yeah, they're kind of just like, they can be quite demanding environments. And I think at the time, that's kind of what I wanted.
Sweet, thank you. The next one which was submitted was, are there any tips for excelling in the application process?
Yeah, loads, probably loads, but I don't know, like the application process is such a broad term because there are lots of different tips that would apply to like interviews or like assessment centers, or I don't even really know how interviews and stuff are happening at the moment. There are probably a whole load of different tips for like Zoom and things like that. But I would say my main tip for people who ask is like, you got to really know what you want. And I think it sounds so basic, but like not many people do the work of really figuring out what it is they actually want in a law firm. And I think there's the temptation to be like, oh my God, I just really need a job. And like, I relate to that as well. And then you kind of just make as many applications as you can. But I think the most effective applications are going to be the firms where you really feel like this is a good fit for me. I would do really well at this firm. I really want to work at this firm because of like certain reasons that apply to you specifically. And you kind of understand what it is that you're trying to do when you're applying to a law firm. I think those applications do genuinely stand out because as someone who's seen a lot of applications from the other side of it, so many applications just copy and paste. And I think, that might get you in the door somewhere, but like, you're going to have a much better chance if you really tailor like what you're saying to that law firm.
Yeah, definitely. The one that sort of links on to that question was about assessment centres. Obviously, they're going to be virtual now, so I don't know if you know too much about what's going to happen with the virtual ones, but was there any like sort of tips or anything that you would give advice about assessment centres?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like all the kind of typical stuff, like do your research beforehand. There's a lot of stuff you can find out on the internet now about like what kind of thing might happen in an assessment centre. And, I think that stuff is helpful, like especially if you're someone like me who kind of stresses out about uncertainty. If you can get a general sense of what an assessment centre might be like based on other people's experiences that you can read online on various like, student websites and like, assessment centre like websites and stuff that will give you a general idea. Obviously, you're never going to know specifically, but you might know, oh, the day kind of looks like this, and then that makes you feel more comfortable about going in there and kind of just performing at your best. And then I'd say the other thing is like, just know your stuff about the firm, about the industry, like do your research, treat it as if you were kind of studying for an exam almost. That's kind of how it worked for me. Like I almost saw my applications as like another module of my law degree, and I gave it as much time as I would have done the other things. And I think that's kind of hard to do because it's like you want to just like fit it in around your existing obligations. But I think really making time for it and treating it like a very like a big part of your life, I think is probably an effective strategy.
Thanks. The next one I got sent in was obviously it's changing, so the information on the SQE that's coming in for the LPC, which someone asked which will firms begin to prefer, sort of, do you know much about it? Obviously it's sort of a new thing that's coming in. We do have a session tomorrow with the Law Society, just for everyone to know, which Tariq's setting up about the SQE. So if you are more interested in obviously like more in-depth information about that, definitely sign up for tomorrow's event, which will be going much more through that, but we didn't know if you had any sort of knowledge or anything about that, because I think people are a bit uncertain at the moment of what's happening.
Yeah, I actually don't have any knowledge about the SQE. But what I would say is that my good friend Christy Wolf, who some of you guys might have come across from social media, she does a lot on it, and she is like really clued up and like works with the regulator and stuff on it. So her YouTube channel is called Law and Broader, and she's just awesome, and she has loads of videos on the SQE. I think they're like, they've got ridiculous amounts of views, so I'd say go check that out.
Perfect. Someone's asked, how did you qualify as a yoga instructor, and do you still find time to teach alongside being a solicitor? Because obviously people may think that solicitor takes up most of your time, so is there time to do things outside?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. Like, I never really set out to like do so many different things at once, so it kind of just has ended up that way. But yoga was something that really genuinely helped me, and it hasn't ever really been like a sort of like nice thing I've done once a week or something. It's always been like, I actually need this to like stay focused, to stay grounded. Like, I suffered quite a lot at university and before with like anxiety and just being like, you know, I'm an overthinker, like I get a bit anxious about things, and yoga's been, you know, a self-care strategy in a kind of very real way, not in the like Instagram way, but in a way that's like, this practice is actually helping me perform better in my life. So the reason I wanted to be a teacher was because I wanted to understand the practice a bit more so I could like just work with myself a bit better, and B, I also wanted to help people like in that kind of way. And I've done a lot of my yoga has actually been teaching in places like homeless shelters, or like, you know, that kind of, those kind of environments where yoga is like such a powerful tool. And yeah, it's been very difficult to teach alongside having a full-time job, especially at a firm that kind of demands your weekends and your vacations sometimes, as well as like, you know, your 9 to 5 or whatever. But I teach normally at a studio called Frame in London, which is like a really fun kind of fitness dance studio. And I just do like a couple of classes on a Saturday. That was kind of how I was doing it before. And yeah, obviously now it's just a bit online here and there, but yeah.
Perfect. We've had a couple questions coming now. Someone's asked, how do you find working in a US-based law firm, and how is it different from a UK law firm?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, and also it's quite hard for me to answer because I've never actually worked at a UK law firm. But I did do a few back schemes and stuff there. I think the differences are probably less than people think. Definitely like the hours thing isn't true. Like, it's not true that you would work more hours at a US law firm than a UK firm. I think like if you're at a big commercial law firm, you're going to just be working a lot, and that's kind of frankly like the nature of the job. But what I would say about US law firms is that sometimes the deals are very international. Like, they might not even have a UK component. You might just be advising on English law, but there might not be like a UK like company or something involved in the deal. And that might mean you're working on sort of strange time zones or something like that. Like you're working on US time quite a lot. And so you can be a little bit more international maybe than at a UK based law firm. What else? Yeah, the culture is sometimes a little bit different in that, you know, you might get more responsibility faster because there's just fewer people in the London office. You might get more opportunities to travel internationally, that kind of thing. But I think probably the cultural differences are less, especially at the bigger US law firms. At a US law firm like, I think of a good example, like Skadden or something in London, like they've got as many trainees as another UK law firm would. So I don't necessarily think there's going to be a huge difference in every case. But I would say if you're interested, definitely look into US firms because there are some like great environments around.
Lovely. And the other question we've got on the chat is, what sector of your law firm do you specialise in, and why did you choose to specialise in this area?
Yeah, so I'm in corporate tax, and the reason I chose to specialise in tax was because I really enjoyed my law degree. Like, I really loved studying law, and I think I was recommended by a tutor at the time, like, if you really enjoy law, you might enjoy a very legal part of being a practicing lawyer, because as you guys like may have started to kind of experience if you've been on work experience things or back schemes and stuff, actually the role of a corporate lawyer it's not that legal sometimes. Like obviously it is a legal role, but a lot of the time it's business focused, it's commercial awareness, it's application of the law to like a set of commercial facts, it's kind of structuring and deal negotiations and that kind of thing. And I really wanted to be working with the law on a daily basis because that's kind of what I enjoyed, of working with legislation and working with guidance and stuff. And so people said either try tax or try litigation. They're kind of two areas which are very law heavy. And tax like really appealed to me. And I actually ended up doing 2 tax seats. I did one here and one in New York. So that's kind of unusual. Like I had a whole year doing tax, which is odd, but it just really clicked for me and I really enjoyed it.
Perfect. And we've got one here saying, what tips can you give for a first year who wants to get into something like corporate tax? Do you have anything that they could get involved in or so early on that might help them to realise if they want to do it or to get into the business?
Yeah, I would say like, I mean, first year, I think there are things around, like in my first year of uni, there weren't really that many options to get involved with firms and stuff. But now I think there are like insight days and like, you know, various other things that firms are kind of putting on for first years. So maybe just have a look around and see, you know, every big corporate law firm will have a tax department. So I wouldn't worry too much about trying to find like anything too specific, but, you know, have a look around, see what firms are offering, see if you can get on an insight day or like some kind of introductory day. And then the best thing to do, honestly, is find someone and ask them questions. Like there's only so much you can figure out from like doing online research and kind of going on a general like corporate open day. Like the best knowledge you're going to get is from people who actually do the job. So if you can get lawyers and ask them questions, like this kind of environment where like I'm telling you what my experience is and do this with like 10 other people, then you'll start to build up a picture of like what the job really looks and feels like. Yeah.
Someone's just asked, what does a typical day entail at your job? So is there sort of a routine you do every day, or is it sort of different a lot? So
yeah, it's definitely different. It kind of depends because the work is transactional, and this is what you'll find if you go into a corporate law firm. Most of the work is deals. So like the kind of life cycle of a deal is like it starts off quite slow normally, and then like there'll be a period of intense negotiations where you're trying to like get the deal going and get it like signed and closed and stuff, and then it's down again while you wait for the next one to come. So the work is always a little bit like this, and it kind of depends like where you are in that cycle. But what I would say is the actual activities of my day are always the same. So always emails, always working with documents, reviewing documents, mostly conference calls, stuff like that, talking to other lawyers, negotiating points, talking to the client. Some of it's like explaining pieces of law to the client or doing a piece of research or reading a textbook. It's kind of those traditional things. And what I would say is it won't be that far off from what you guys already do in your law degree. Like I think the law degree is a good introduction to the work of a lawyer. Those skills that you're developing now, like analysis, critical thinking, ability to read and write and comprehend and speak and understand and explain stuff, like all of those skills are like what you're going to be using in your day-to-day job. So it doesn't sound very exciting. And sometimes it is a bit like, oh, you're just sat at a desk all day, like just doing kind of calls and emails. But, you know, you got to like figure out what your passion is behind all of that. And then, you know, just keep reminding yourself what it is you're passionate about. And there are exciting times as well. It's just like a lot of it is legal work, and you guys already know what that kind of feels like, I think.
Perfect. I had one comment about commercial awareness tips. Obviously, a lot of sectors and law firms are all very much surrounding with commercial awareness. Is there anything you could sort of give tips on for maybe first, second year students that want to get into something like city law firms, and what commercial awareness they may need before they go in, let's say?
Yeah, I think there are some good books around. There was, at least when I was applying, there was a guy called Chris Stokes who was writing books. And he wrote like all you need to know about commercial awareness and all you need to know about corporate law or something like that. And I think even though those books are kind of basic and they're just like overviews, it's quite helpful if you do want to flick through something just to get a sense of the basic terminology, the kind of things you're thinking about, like the way to talk about commercial awareness. So if you do walk into a law firm and someone says, define commercial awareness, which they actually might, that might be a question, then you would already have something in your head that is kind of your answer to that. And the other thing is just like reading the commercial press and the like financial news and stuff. which again can be kind of boring and like it's hard to understand if you're not really like if you're not working in that sector. But I think it's good to kind of start reading like, oh, what's going on in the business world, what kind of deals are going on at the moment, you know, what firms are involved in doing what, like start reading the legal press and things like that as well. But yeah, I'd say start off with a really basic kind of book on that kind of thing.
Someone's asked, are there any pros and cons of working in London as a solicitor? So obviously it's sort of in the city. Is that any different maybe if you know other people that work in sort of regional ones? And are there any pros and cons you would say about working in London as a solicitor?
Yeah, I think London will be like the most intense place you can work, mainly just because the culture is very like, because obviously it's got that kind of like financial district kind of feeling about it, where like everything is very full on the whole time, and there's kind of like high energy, high intensity. Obviously not at the moment, and who knows what it will be like in the future, whether like the future of work will look completely different now that people know that we can just work at home. But obviously I think with a regional firm, and I did some back schemes in regional firms as well, and I think it's good to try that if it's something that might interest you, you know, doing something local, trying your local solicitors, because it is a different kind of feeling, even if the work is similar in its actual nature. So I would say it depends what kind of pace of life you want to go for. A lot of people go into London and do the city thing for a while and then think maybe they want to try something else later. So that's one option. And the other thing with being around in London, which you may not get at a regional firm, is opportunities to work internationally. And I think the main London offices of London firms usually offer like secondments if you want to go and work abroad, like in Europe or in the US or something. So if that's something that you want to do, I think probably you're more likely to get that opportunity in London as opposed to regional. Yeah.
Perfect. Someone's asked, obviously you said you worked in New York for a bit, and they wanted to know how your experience was in the US, working as a lawyer from England. Was that, you know, something you would encourage other people to maybe do if they wanted to?
Yeah, like I think New York is cool. I actually didn't ask to go out there. It was just, I wanted to do another taxi actually in London, and they said I couldn't. They said I could do one abroad, so I went to New York. But what I would say is that it's a like very demanding culture out there, even more so than London. Like it's very full on. If you guys have ever been to New York before, it's kind of like the culture of the city kind of transposes over into like the working life as well. It's very like fast. It's very demanding. I worked a lot when I was out there. Like I basically didn't really like see much of the city as a tourist. But I was just kind of there to work. And I think so that is what a secondment is essentially. And it's not like a kind of holiday. It is like it's just working in another city. However, like it was really interesting to be out there. It was so interesting to learn about US law and their legal system, which is like totally different to ours. So it was kind of learning everything again, like a whole new set of tax laws. And obviously with the US law firm, it was like really helpful for me to spend some time in the kind of like in the like central part of the firm and meet a lot of the partners out there and sort of like get around a bit and like, you know, get to know other people. So yeah, I'd say it was fun, but I was like definitely ready to come back. I was like time to go back to London. Yeah.
That's great. I think that's sort of all the questions that we've got for today. Thank you so much, Eloise. Alaina has got a few announcements just to say for the people that are on here, just about a few things coming up, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. And if you guys, I maybe should have mentioned this earlier, I'm really bad at like doing promo, but if you, I wrote a book like a few years ago called The Junior Lawyer's Handbook. And if you want to know more about that, and like it's kind of more for like junior lawyers, so maybe like towards the end of your law degree, or like as you're thinking about applying for firms and stuff. But yeah, it's by the Law Society, and if you want to know more about that, you can come find me on Instagram and like ask me anything you want.
Yeah, of course. We've got your Instagram linked on the post we put, so if anyone does have any more questions or anything, feel free to use that link to get a hold of you. But yeah, thank you so much.